When I picked up the Pixel 2 XL to use for a few weeks, I expected the phone to disappoint me. I mean, what do you expect from a phone that is 5 years old, especially an Android phone? Usually what we hear all over the internet is that Android phones are slow, they become shit after a few years and are not worth the money. Instead, I was kind of blown away by how well the Pixel 2 XL has held up. Few shortcomings aside, I actually loved using this phone. Now the first thing I noticed when picking this phone was the cold feel of the metal build, as well as the sleekness compared to recent phones. That and obviously the wear and tear. This phone was mostly without a case and always without a screen protector, and has still withstood most of the hard times. Something I loved and still find nostalgic is the two-tone finish on the back. In some ways, the Pixel 6 and Pixel 7 are an evolution of this design. The phone also came in the iconic panda color, which was really hard to get back then, hence you're seeing the black color that I have. Another iconic design element and something still missed dearly on recent Pixel devices is the back fingerprint sensor. It is still the fastest and most reliable way to unlock this phone. I understand Google had to move to under-display sensors to make their phones look more modern, but those haven't seen much success lately. Now the biggest misfire the Pixel 2 XL had at its launch was the display. Eventually, after a lot of backlash, Google decided to release an update to make it more saturated. Of course, by today's standards, it's not that great of a display, although I still found it to be fairly responsive. The saturation on this is a bit on the higher side, and I feel Google did this intentionally to get back on the reviewers. It also has a curved display, or more likely a curved bezel. I think it was one of the first Pixel phones to feature this, but don't quote me on that. Another notorious thing that Google was known and have recently mended was having low brightness on their phones. The Pixel 2 XL suffered from this issue, and I did notice it as well, but even after all that, it was a decent enough display to use daily. A quick question for you all, if you had to guess 2 areas where this phone definitely shows its age, which would they be? And while you're guessing, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Well, those 2 areas are performance and software. No surprises here. The phone has a 5-year-old SoC, and unless and until it had the Apple A Bionic chip, I knew going into this review that the phone would show a lot of lag, and that indeed was the case. The phone is fine in opening basic apps such as Instagram, YouTube and all that, but when you start throwing multiple things at this chip, it starts to fall apart, and that really got me frustrated a few times. Probably the only time I wished I had a newer phone. But even with these shortcomings, it performed fine in day-to-day tasks such as calling, messaging, social media surfing and all that. Although the phone does show its age in software because it has Android 11 and not Android 13 as the latest Pixel phones, yet I did not miss it a tiny bit. Truth be told, I actually prefer Android 11 over Android 13. That's actually only in a few areas. I miss the ability to put my phone on silent with the press of the power and volume up button. I also prefer the more AMOLED friendly black color of dark mode compared to a lighter shade in Android 13. I also love the swipe gestures on the back sensor. There's also a topic I wanted to discuss with you guys in a future video, one which you won't miss if you're subscribed to the channel, is the fact that Google is only offering 3 years of software updates for its Pixel devices, instead of the 4 to 5 I expected because they're using their own custom Tensor chip. On the contrary, companies like Samsung and OnePlus are offering 4 major Android updates, even though they are using Snapdragon chipsets, and even though I don't expect them to hold their end of the bargain. You know how I said there were only 2 things where this phone shows its age? Well, actually there's also the third thing, which is the battery life. Unsurprisingly, the small battery paired with a very old chip and an old Android software don't make this phone last very long. That's all I want to say about the battery life. I was fine with it since I'm always around a charger, but if I wasn't, dealing this phone would have been a very tough task. But let's talk about what made me fall in love with this phone, the cameras. Over the span of 3 years, I took north of 4,000 shots on this phone, and even today with the right conditions and good lighting, this phone can still take some amazing shots. This was the phone that leapfrogged over all other phones and became the best smartphone camera in that year. I feel this camera is what put Google on the map and made Apple and Samsung step up their game in the future. Anyways, I'm sharing some of the best shots taken with this phone. And for a 5-year-old phone, there is still night mode in this thing. Video quality obviously isn't that good, and that is in a way still a weak point for Pixel phones. But in photography, I feel there is no phone better than a Pixel phone. No wonder the Pixel 6a and Pixel 7 Pro came on top in MKBHD's blind smartphone camera test. And I don't really know what to say for the outro of this video. The Pixel 2 XL has a really special place in my heart. It was the first phone I bought with my own money when I came to Canada. It was the phone that made me fall in love with Android devices. And this was the phone that I featured in my first ever YouTube video on this channel. Now with how deep I am in the Apple ecosystem, I'm not sure if I'll ever go back to using a Pixel device. Maybe if Google adds me to their Team Pixel. Well, that's it for this video guys. I will see you guys in the next one.